What are the pros and cons to taking a gap year with DCI or with WGI? So one of the things that we need to consider with this is you can save money by actually earning more over a summer instead of losing earned and potential income. So what is earned income? So earned income is like money that you've already earned. So instead of spending it on tour fees, you can save that. Another is potential income, which is like the money that you would get from a job, whether it's like mowing lawns in the summer or teaching private lessons, etc. All of that money and the tour money is gone if you decide to do DCI or WGI. But another thing you need to consider is the amount of gains that you can get in terms of the improvements marching versus practicing on your own. If you are marching with a group, you are going to spend the summer refining a book and working on your movement, etc. If you are practicing on your own, you could have, instead of spending that time working on a book or show music, you could focus on the basics, like these technique exercises right here. Like let's say you were spending 4 or 5 hours a day working on show music, you could instead spend it working on the basics, like improving your roll timing or your diddle timing or your speed of your diddles or your 3 strokes or whatever it is that you need to work on as an individual. You can sit there and focus on just that thing rather than what the group average needs to work on. So if you're in a sectional with like, let's say 8 people, then you're going to work on whatever it is that will improve that line with all 8 of those people rather than the thing that you individually need to work on to improve. So if you have great flam drags, but the rest of the line isn't able to play a flam drag very well, you might spend a significant portion of your day working up those flam drags, even though you personally don't need to do this. So if you are practicing at home, you can make more gains than you are practicing in a group, but that depends on what you are practicing. So if you spend your time working on these technique exercises, great. If you spend your time working on these like 900 plus grid variations, great. But if you spend your time working on like show licks or chop exercises, might not be as great. You might not make as much progress as if you were to spend your time working on techniques. The same thing with working on a book or show. So when you are doing this, what I recommend doing is practicing by focusing on consistency of sound quality and technique rather than the speed of your playing. So if you're using any of these play alongs, like even if you decide to work on Blue Devil's like 99 shopping spree or whatever, go into the timestamps and go slow. Refine the technique and slowly speed up. That is likely not something you're going to be doing in rehearsal time or sectional time. You're likely going to be playing at performance tempo or a little bit under performance tempo to work something up, rather than like, I'm going to start at 40 and go 1 click at a time like you can with these play alongs. So if you take a gap year, you can spend the time making huge gains with your progress if you focus on the basics instead of refining for the show. Now, one of the things that actually marching does is it forces you to spend time throughout the day actually improving. Whereas if you're on your own, it's really up to your discipline as an individual to go, okay, I'm going to spend X number of hours a day practicing. So if you're like doing all days, like back when I was marching, you would have your entire day planned for you. Like we're going to do sectionals and then we're going to do all ensemble, or we're going to do like drumline only, and then we're going to go back into sectionals. And you had your whole day planned. But you might have Netflix, or you might have friends who want to socialize, or you might want to go travel, etc. All of those things can take away from the time you would have spent if you're doing all days. So what you have to consider if you're going to do a gap year or a gap semester on DCI or WGI is, do you have the time, and will you actually invest the time wisely if you know yourself to actually sit there and practice this kind of thing, or not? You might not, and that's okay. Maybe marching is better for you because you'll actually pick up sticks. What I do recommend is setting aside consistent time to practice daily and try not to let anything or anyone interrupt that. So have the same like couple of hours every single day, like, hey, I'm just going to practice from like 8 to 10 every single morning, and then I'll go work my job in the afternoon, etc. And again, focus on the technique exercises, focus on slowly improving, and that will allow you to improve. When you're doing this, also set short, mid, and long-term goals. When you're working with a group, there are goals of just like trying to improve the stuff that is dirty as an ensemble. But when you're working on yourself, it's like, well, what do I work on? There's like just under 300 technique exercises. Which one of these do I do? What about the 900 plus grid variations? Which do I do? It's hard to pick when there's literally a couple thousand exercises to practice here, but focus your time by developing some short, mid, and long-term goals. Like if you want to be able to play Blue Devil's 99 shopping spree, you might want to work on like some of the rudiment builders down here in the technique exercises, or maybe some of the diddle exercises to improve your interpretation, which will make it so that you can play long-term the Blue Devil's shopping sprees that are on this page or on my YouTube channel. channel. Another really important thing to focus on is to try and get feedback throughout the process. This can be in person with like private lessons with people, or this can be online from different sources. So some people will post like on Instagram or on Reddit, like, hey, here's my current ability on whatever it is that I'm working on. Do you have feedback for me? What I recommend is if you're going to do that is share at least 2 takes of that, because if you only share the best rep, it might not be representative of the inconsistencies overall. So if you play at least 2 reps of like, let's say a roll exercise, people are able to hear, okay, what changed and what was the same between each one of those reps? What was an inconsistent error and what is a consistent error to work on? Maybe you just had a brain fart and you're like, oh, I just forgot that, or I messed up the interpretation of that. But if you're playing it the same way poorly every single time, that will allow people to give higher quality feedback if you are seeking that online that you could get if you were in person, where you're like, all right, let's play through this 5 times or whatever with a private lesson instructor, which I do highly recommend taking. And I say that as somebody who no longer teaches privately. I'd rather like create these online resources because it helps more people. But back when I was teaching privately, like that was the fastest way for students to make growth, is through that one-on-one interaction rather than full group. Because again, thinking about like sectionals and full group, like you're trying to work on things that the group as a whole needs to work on, not the thing that you individually need to work on the most. As a side note, like back when I was doing all days, one of the things that I loved is one of the snare techs that we had on one of the years that I marched really advocated for individual time to be able to work on stuff. So we'd play stuff as like a group and then be like, okay, you need to work on this, you need to work on that, you need to work on this other thing that's different from all those other people. Go spend like 30 minutes like refining that on your own, and then let's get back together as a snare line and we'll try and like put it together and see if we've made improvement. So that's a little pro tip that I highly recommend doing, and that I did as an educator as well. Some students get discouraged, like, oh, I didn't get it in a day or in an hour or even in a week. And it's like, expand your time horizon of how long you think it actually takes to get good and to refine your playing from that intermediate to the advanced level. It can take months or years to actually improve something, and that's normal. Dom Moyo, he started teaching college when he graduated from high school. Like, he was that good of a drum kit player. He spent an entire year every day working on one measure, one groove, just trying to get it to feel right. And it took him a whole year until it happened. And this dude like literally teaches Steve Gadd's son. Like, he's that good of a performer. So whenever I talk to students about like how long it can take to actually improve something with consistent effort, it can sometimes take months or years even to actually improve something if you're just constantly working on it and trying to refine it. This is my progress journal for practicing limb independence on drum kit. I keep track of whatever my starting BPM is and then the quality of playing when I'm doing this. So in this case, I played through it and it needed a lot of work. Some other categories are like, it was just meh, or it was technically proficient, so I was like able to actually play through it and it sounded fine. And then musical, where it's like you're playing all the notes correctly and it sounds great while doing it, so not just playing the ink on the page. I also keep track of how did I feel while doing this. Was it out of control? Was I bored? Was I making progress? Was it fun? Or was it pushing my limits? This is a great way that you can work on your rudiments or a particular exercise. Keep track of whatever it is that you're working on, and then over time you can see I've increased my BPM or I've increased the quality of playing over an extended period of time, because it's sometimes easy to get lost in the playing, so you actually don't really recognize, oh, I've actually made progress over the last several months, years, etc.